Welcome. This is D.L. Hughes from VelocityWriting.com, where you learn to write with speed, passion, purpose, and profitability. Poetry is a hot topic, and I don't mean that poetry books are selling like hotcakes. They're not. The reason this is a hot topic is because poets can be very emotional about poetry in general and their poetry in particular. So I'm going to have to dance my booty off to avoid attacks by Saturday night fevered poets. Let's answer the basic question. Is poetry as dead as disco? Well, disco isn't exactly dead, but it is an acquired taste. We'll look together at poetry, the market for it, and how poets can make money with poetry, and that starts right now. Will you subscribe if you haven't already? That would mean a lot to me. Also, click on the bell icon so you never miss out on my latest videos. Feel free to share this video on social media. I have expanded bonus material on this topic and links to sources at VelocityWriting.com. See the direct link to the blog post in the YouTube description. Let me throw a name to you. Joy Harjo. Who is that? Think about it for a moment. She is the current Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry to the Library of Congress. She will serve a total of 2 years before they pick another person. By the way, according to the Library of Congress, the law states that such a consultant is equivalent to the Poet Laureate of the United States. Oh, that's so sad. Damned with faint praise. Before 1985, Poet Laureate meant something. Now it's just a consultant with an equivalent meaning. So, if you knew her name, she gets a good job review. If not, well, she didn't raise much consciousness, and that speaks to the state of poetry in America. And America is not alone. Many nations are also seeing less interest in poetry. One Newsweek staffer pretty well summed poetry up for most people just a few years ago. This person was a literate, college-educated person and made their living as a writer. Still, this writer said, "When younger, I was an avid reader who despised rhymed and rhythmic writing. Plowing through tangled symbol and allusion, I wondered why the damn poets couldn't just say what they meant." Later, this same writer gained some appreciation for poetry and analyzed why interest in poetry had faded. The conclusion: people don't possess the patience to read a poem 20 times before the sound and sense of it takes hold. They aren't willing to let the words wash over them like a wave, demanding instead for the meaning to flow clearly and quickly. And so we have it from a reader's perspective. Readers no longer appreciate Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, or even Sylvia Plath as they once did. Sales statistics for poetry are hard to come by, but Statista reports that over a decade only about 10 to 12,000 new mainline poetry titles are published each year. Oh, there are spikes at times. For example, Emma Watson of Harry Potter fame started talking about the poetry of Indian-Canadian poet Rupi Kaur. As a result, her book of poems and drawings, called Milk and Honey, hit the New York Times bestseller list for a while. She made a pile of money off that, I imagine. Now, there are a small group of notable poets today, but we have little true idea if they are making money from their art or if they are reduced to being published as social media memes. The group of notables includes Rupi Kaur, of course, R.H. Sin, Amanda Lovelace, Atticus, Nehura Waheed, and R.M. Drake. Now, let me mention that not everyone agrees that what these people are writing is actually poetry. Much of it is more like pithy epigrams, not poems. However, poetic forms do change. Why did poetry go into a nosedive as an art form? Reader response to poetry was a major factor. The Newsweek columnists that I mentioned nailed it. People don't possess the patience to read a poem 20 times before the sound and sense of it takes hold. But we can't blame readers alone. Poetry went bad because poets started turning out massive amounts of drivel that no one wanted to read. I took an in-depth look at poetry books on Amazon, but I'm not going to name names. I did see trends, however. Books about writing poetry sell far better than books of poetry. Poetry anthologies do better than books by individual poets. And far too many poetry books by individual poets are doggerel about the angst of life and lost loves. This should trigger a question on the part of poets. That is, why are all these self-absorbed, introspective poetry books going on the trash heap when there is a resurgence of interest in the poetry of people like Ruth B. Kaur, R.H. Sin, Amanda Lovelace, and that elite group? Well, they are writing about the soul, as poets always do, but they are finding new words and new methods of expressing soul yearnings. They are looking into a mirror, but they also see you and the world in that reflection, and not just themselves. These poets are writing about things that matter. It's not gushy romantic moon-June rhymes. They are writing poems about indigenous peoples, social justice, women's issues, and other topics that grab the interest of today's readers. That is the point. Young people might read Walt Whitman for a class they're taking, but if they want their souls inflamed, as poetry has a reputation for doing, they want poems about world-changing topics. Today, if you're going to be a poet, you must be a warrior poet. If you intend to be a poet with a following, then you must have an agenda that resonates with readers. Yes, a poet like Ruth B. Kaur comes across as a little sentimental at times, but at her core, she is a woman with a message. Here's one powerful example about the role of women. It's called Progress. Our work should equip the next generation of women to outdo us in every field. This is the legacy we'll leave behind. So, my advice to poets is to stop being self-absorbed. Your romanticism and your angst are not unique. Readers don't care since they've already been through it themselves. If you insist on writing poetry about all the dreadful things in your life, do it, but then burn it. Write poetry about things that matter to others. Also, and this is very important, rethink how you distribute your poetry. Instapoets on Instagram gets lots of attention. Publish a book of those poems only after you have gained some visibility there. There's this man, an old geezer now, who wrote some powerful poetry that supported social change, from racial equality to prison reforms and many things in between. Yes, and he wrote some lovey-dovey stuff too. But the Nobel Committee gave the Nobel Prize in Literature to Bob Dylan for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. Hey, those weren't just songs. Those words weren't just lyrics. Dylan created new poetic expressions. And do you know something? You can do that too. Old-style poetry, with its old, tired themes, is as dead as disco. In most cases, it does not speak to the present or the future. It's the pipe smoked by those addicted to iambic pentameter. We need to think of new ways to express new ideas in the form of a new poetry. So I have an assignment for you if you wish to accept it. Think of an issue that inflames you. Sit down and write a poem that identifies the issue and offers a solution. Be creative and keep it to one page. Have a great writing day.